For me, at the time, knowledge was atomized and kept into little cubicles. Chemistry had nothing to do with physics. English had nothing to do with history. Biology had nothing to do with philosophy. But to my great awakening, I found out that it is to the contrary.
The ceremony witnessed the honoring of the prominent Gambian author with a prestigious award for his immense contributions to Gambian literature. There were poetry recitations and short plays by students, as well as paper presentations on Baba's work by the University of the Gambia lecturers. Baba Silla is among the first Gambian writers to look at the colonial Gambian society and aptly assesses the economic policies of the colonial masters and the reactions of the Gambians to such repugnant policies. His use of local Gambian names, history and storytelling is a clear indication that literature mirrors society and that every text is a reflection of the people. Thus, this author has paved the way for emerging writers to continue from where he may stop in the literary journey, to unearth and present the stories of many who lack the voice for them to be heard. Buba SMCC, GRTS.
As the PAC scrutiny of institutions continues at the National Assembly chambers, the University of the Gambia, UTG, tabled its activity and financial report before deputies. Despite the grilling session, the UTG's documents for the year under review were adopted amidst intense arguments among lawmakers. We have more in this report by Maud Bajan.
The Gambia UTG on Tuesday survived the PAC committee's scrutiny of its institutional engagement after a marathon encounter. Surviving their latest PAC meeting was no easy ride for the UTG top brass, which included Vice Chancellor Professor Muhammadu M. Oka.
The University of the Gambia cannot and will not be run by an individual. The reason where we are is because of many able men and women who walk hand in hand with the Vice Chancellor to improve the university.
Before finally adopting the UTG's documents for the year concerned, nearly 6 hours of dialogue and interrogative discussion unfolded at the National Assembly chambers.
We have the understanding that anything that is not in the management letter is an issue that has been solved already. But because of the nature of this problem, we would want, and also bearing in mind that we are not trying to, whatever, undermine the integrity of the National Audit Office. We want evidence to show that that $5 million which warranted the qualification of the University of Gambia's account is all cleared out.
I think the major problem here is that your governing council problem. I think it's about time you look for a chairman of governing council that is going to be available. He doesn't need to be a minister. You want a professional, competent person to run the affairs of council so that you are at peace with the decisions you make in council. Otherwise, you'll always be frowning at you. Because if you look at all the audit queries, it's always saying there is no approval, we cannot provide approval from council.
The UTG Finance Director responded to many of the questions that were asked during the proceedings.
Management has taken note of your concerns, but we want to point out that most of these transactions were done on an emergency basis. For instance, during convocation ceremonies, emergency-triggered travels, essential and emergency purchases that had to be made in order for the smooth running of the university. Additionally, impromptu dinners held for our visiting professors and examiners for the medical schools at restaurants or guests have specific hotel preferences. From their own, in quotes, in parentheses, from their own funds transferred to the university to execute the transactions for them, close parentheses, which cannot be subjected to competitive bidding.
Eyebrows were raised in relation to the UTG's 29 bank accounts, many of which were not reconciled. Other improper financial operations such as unsigned monetary transactions were also frowned upon.
We noted that UTG maintained 29 separate bank accounts in 2011, and no reconciliation was performed for 27 of these bank accounts. Reconciliations were performed for only 2 bank accounts held at Trust Bank Limited, namely the income account number, the income account and the expenditure account. These reconciliations were not reviewed. Monthly bank reconciliation for the income accounts were not done, but instead a single reconciliation was performed covering the period January through December 2011. This reconciliation statement has huge reconciling items which were not cleared and still outstanding as at the time of the conclusion of the audit.
Many deputies hailed the courage of Vice Chancellor Carr and his team in accepting areas of failure and weakness. They also acknowledged UTG's efforts in trying to meet the tertiary education needs of Gambians.
We have all recognized the strides, the achievement made by the UTG over the years. We are all in this country, and we know the successes that the UTG have actually made over the years. They have really expanded, and they are actually developing this university, as the Vice Chancellor said, to be one of the best universities in the world.
The Speaker of the National Assembly, Honorable Abdoulaye Bojang, stated that lawmakers would work cooperatively with the university in ensuring its further development. Established by an Act of Parliament in 1999 to, among other things, cater for the Gambia's tertiary education needs, the Gambia's only university has a pile of salient issues around its operations. The UTG officials have now been tasked to further buckle up and be more pragmatic in running the institution proudly described by many as the nation's greatest asset. Modu Bajan, Grts News.
Well, disciples of the Qadiriya Brotherhood in the Gambia recently received one of the greatest scholars, Sheikh Omar Al-Farouk. The Sheikh presided over an Islamic conference at the Paradise Suites Hotel with the theme Revival of the Sunnah, and Famara Kanji has more on that.
Of the grand scholar Sheikh Omar Al-Farouk in Banjul was a historic moment to faithful of the Qadiriya Brotherhood in the Gambia. With his delegation from the United States of America, Al-Farouk arrived in Banjul with the objective of strengthening the Qadiriya Brotherhood through the revival of the Sunnah. The Sheikh, on arrival in Banjul, was welcomed by disciples of Abdul Qadir Jelani, the torchbearer behind the Brotherhood, which continues to attract thousands of people since its inception. Reviving the Sunnah of the Prophet was the theme of the conference, which was held at the Paradise Suites Hotel. The conference commenced with the recitation of hymns which touched deep down the heart of disciples. Speaking at the Islamic conference organized to sensitize the masses on the significance of reviving the Sunnah of the Prophet and its adherents in Islam, Sheikh Omar Al-Farouk expressed gratitude over the great ventures undertaken by disciples of the Qadiriya Brotherhood to make Islam a flourishing religion in the world.
Service and love and the moral traits that follow that, these are what build society on the foundations of harmony and unity, and they facilitate for us to work together to solve every problem. The messenger of God, may God extol him and greet him with perfect peace, was, as we have said, a servant. He never asked to be served, and he was the most noble of all human beings. His companions, may God be content with them all, imitated him in this and followed his example. They too were humble people. They were servants. They were not people who demanded to be served. This was the pattern of behavior of the upright Muslims of the first generations and the upright believers of all generations.
The Sheikh touched on several aspects of the Sunnah, making more emphasis on the link that bound the different brotherhoods together. His knowledge and exposure to the wider world had made him a scholar to reckon with in the United States, and above all inspirational to young Muslims who read from his writings and publications.
No one shall enter the garden who has in his heart an atom's weight of pride. In this hadith, the Prophet defined pride as a quality that is opposite of service and love. He said, peace be upon him, verily God is beautiful and loves beauty. Thus pride is not dressing nicely, as the hadith makes clear, but pride is denial of what is right and looking down on other people. Denial of what is right or what is people's right means to reject it out of arrogance